All right, welcome everybody to the Composers Roundtable. This is episode 10, and my name is Samuel Turnquist, and I'm here with Simeon Amburgey, and we also have Tracy Collins here, who is the founder of Indigenous Samples, or maybe just Indigenous. He creates instruments, is also a musician. So we are very honored to have you here. Very much welcome to you, Tracy.
Well, thank you. It's great to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
All right. So I thought maybe we should just start briefly. Who are you and what do you do? So the viewers will know more about you.
My name's Tracy Collins, and I am, as you said, the founder of Indiginus. You can call it just Indigenous or Indigenous Sample Libraries. And I was a composer for many years. I guess I still am a composer. That didn't stop. But I founded Indigenous in right around 2004, and we've been building that up ever since, and it's been great.
All right.
What started that? I mean, what caused you to create this company to begin with?
Well, I'd been sampling. I was working in a studio. I was fortunate enough to have been hired in a commercial studio in Gainesville, Florida, where I would work on people's songs. They would come into the MIDI studio I worked in, and I would produce tracks for them. And also I would do the commercial music there. And I remember my boss came in one time, and this is why I like this job. He just popped in the door. There was already a client in the room with me. And he said, "Tracy, I've been working on the railroad and something Egyptian, and I need it in 2 hours." And he walked out of the room. Which is, who has a job like that? It was great.
Oh, what's happening here? It's Simeon with his new sample library going on. Well, yeah, but that's crazy. So basically, you worked as a composer, and what happened? How did you move on from there?
Well, around after the 9/11 attacks in New York, which I'm not in New York, but it affected the economy very much all over the world, all over U.S. Studio work kind of dried up, and the production. And I was doing some production here in my home studio.
Actually, were you working as a playing musician or more of the computer
no,
sample music?
Just in a studio. I was a studio musician, and producing songs for local artists. And and also I've done work for Discovery Channel, National Geographic, as far as composing for them. And for 20 years, a friend of mine, Mark Emery, and I had worked on a fishing show called One More Cast, which was great. 20 seasons, 13 shows a season, which was great. It was fun, but it was like what you would always need new sounds, and I had already learned about sampling from the studio where I worked at, where there was actually a guitar store at the end of the building. I could go borrow a guitar, bring it into my little Studio B where I'm at, put a microphone, sample a few notes, and then just use that sound. So that's how I learned how the techniques on sampling. But 2004, everything kind of dried up, and it was a tough time for us here, my wife and I, and it was the only thing I could think of was maybe we could try making a commercial sample library and selling it. So I borrowed a few guitars, 3 guitars from friends. I borrowed microphones from another friend, and I borrowed a early Pro Tools interface from a studio where I worked, and started sampling these 3 guitars. And actually, one of them there was a 4th guitar, which was a nylon string guitar, which was a Sears Silvertone nylon guitar. So that first guitar, an acoustic guitar collection, is actually a Sears Silvertone guitar I had under my bed when I was a kid. But put those together, and we started selling them. At first, it was for Akai samplers. So we had CD-ROMs that we would actually have to mail out. Somebody would order it on PayPal. And my wife and I would burn the CD, would print out the little inserts and cut them out with scissors and go to the post office and mail them. But after a couple of years, it became possible to download them, and then it took off after that, and the market as we know it started to appear. And I was just fortunate to be part of it at that time, I think, because it's much more crowded now than it was at that point.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so you were one of the first ones to do this, and that's why it's easier to be established today. So what do you mean?
Well, we were small fish, obviously. We did have help from a guy named Rob Purcelli, who had a forum. He's an English guy, had a forum for Akai samplers, and another guy named Steve Howell, who was kind of a sampling legend. He worked with Akai. As a matter of fact, he designed a lot of the interfaces for the early Akai samplers.
Oh.
And I think he was Welsh. He's passed away since then. But he, for some reason, they took upon them to promote Little Indiginus, and it really helped. And his name helped a lot in the very beginning. So
yeah, and it's so crucial to have a good contact, a good gatekeeper. What should you call it? It really seems to help. Yeah. So what is I know it's a lot more to talk about, but I just was wonder, Indigenous, why that name, and does it mean anything actually to you?
It did because, well, I was working on a fishing show, so I needed to get American sounding instruments or folk.
Yeah. That's true.
I'm actually a prog guy myself, so we ended up putting all these things together, and then adding, as composers do for reality shows, putting in way too much French horns and timpanis, which you don't need really on a bass boat.
No.
But you can't help yourself, can you? You just you go for it. But we needed these instruments, and so I started using the show as a proving ground for the sample for the libraries, which worked, and you could tell what worked. And Mark, my partner on that, would we could see how well he worked with them, and it really helped to fine tune them and understand what people expect from a sample library.
Oh. For each of those episodes, how much lead time did you have to create like the whole soundtrack for like so the episodes were like 40 minutes or 20 minutes long?
It would be it's a half hour, 28 minute, 20, I can't remember what it was, 26, 28. But you had sometimes 3 or 4 minutes of music, sometimes more, depending on what we thought we could get away with. I loved it. I would get up on show day. Sometimes I'd have an idea or two, sometimes not. And I would get up at 6 o'clock in the morning, and the editor would have sent the show as a QuickTime movie. So download it, put it in a digital performer, and write 1 or 2 pieces at least before 10 o'clock, when I would go to Mark's house, where he would have written some things, and we just put them together.
Wow.
And just see what we had, and then just lock it to picture. Sometimes we didn't even have picture. I would have to go pick up the show on the way over to Mark's house. But I loved it. I loved that kind of, because you had to come up with something. There was no time for daydreaming or for waiting for inspiration to strike. You just had to put your mind to it, and pretty much whatever you came up with at first, you had to go with it. But yeah, I would. When I was doing it, I could put a couple, 1 or 2 minute pieces together. Excuse me, in a couple hours, or 2 or 3.
But did you also develop the sample library at the same time? I mean, was it like, oh, I needed this guitar and I don't have it, so I'm gonna create it right now, or you know what I mean?
Yeah, actually, yeah, it would be. I mean, the something like a fishing show. First of all, there's only 13 episodes in a year, so that's only 13 days you're working on that, really. But yeah, usually I'd be working on them at the same time. For a while, I was playing in a band actually, and we had traveled around a lot. It was actually an Amway band. Okay, we went and played Amway conventions, so we'd have to fly out somewhere, and I would have at first it was a Mac Plus. It was one of the cube-shaped old Macs with floppy drives. And I had this box I carried it in. It would go in the van. So I'd be in the hotel room trying to work out, things out with my Mac Plus when I was on the road, and then get back and Monday or Tuesday get with Mark and then finish the show.
Wow. So you use Digital Performer? Was that your main composing or sequencing platform?
I went from originally, I started with a Commodore 64, something called Super Sequencer 64.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
And then I went to a Mac, and it was a Vision, then Studio Vision, and they were eaten by Gibson, I think.
Oh yeah,
and destroyed.
Don't. Then
I think Gibson destroyed Baldwin piano and organs.
Yes.
And then they destroyed another one, didn't they?
They destroyed Cakewalk, but it resurrected.
Right. Oh, wow. It's back.
I didn't know they destroyed all that. Yeah.
But guitar players. I wondered if it was guitar players, having something against keyboard players because they kept buying our stuff and then putting it out of business. So I don't know.
Wow.
But they're not going to get Indigenus, I can tell you that.
Okay, that's good. No, but
so this is what that. Oh shoot. Okay, let's go. Well, I was trying to show a picture of the
I'll get back to that later.
Okay, the Mac Plus, because that was like one of the first Macs that I actually saw in the flesh as well, and it was like, oh my gosh, look at the graphics and look at the screen, and it's got a mouse, and it's like it's so integrated, and so it was. But it was like how much? Like a couple of $1,000s when it first came out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was. And hey, but you got 2 megabytes of memory in that thing.
Yeah, and it was huge.
So wow, what
that was
you can do with 2 megabytes of memory?
Yeah, but I remember I didn't have that one. I worked on a Atari that had only 1 megabyte or just above. But it had I don't know what it was called, that kind of monitor, but it was black and white because of high resolution. So it could not be in colors. And I worked on the first Cubase there, and I loved it. And you could actually do quite a bit. It was only MIDI then, but it must have been similar experience, I guess, to the Mac. I never used those, but I remember a friend of mine had those. But
yeah, these kids don't know how easy they have it these days.
That's true. You have to have a separate unit attached to the computer just to get the sounds. But that's what I'm saying. I find that fascinating. So you loved it, and you were creating all this music for this show, but at the same time you had to develop a new instrument. I just want to pause to think about that, because it's not like I'm sitting here writing a piece of music like, I need a new guitar sample. Let me just get my mics and my guitar. I mean, to me, I don't know anything about it, but that sounds like a lot of work, and also the limitations back then. It's not
back then. Yes, the limitations. Our first library, acoustic guitar collection, and I spoke to Simeon about this. The whole instrument, had to go within 32 megabytes. Okay, so and that wasn't the total memory. I'm looking down here I still have the old sampler down the side here, but yeah, you had to cut the samples you had to choose your notes carefully, and you also had to loop the sustains so you could fit you can't let a 10 or 15 second note sound completely. You wouldn't have enough memory. So you had to learn how to do it concisely.
Yeah.
So
to make it long enough, to make it short enough, but long enough at the same time. Short enough where you had enough where you could loop that last segment to make it. But so it's like this game of averages, or where do I cut this, or where do I loop this? Man, interesting.
Right. Yeah, I had a rule of, and my wife Brenda, she helped me she helped me with this, and we had an early editing program where we could do the loops, and she helped me a lot. So we had a 5-second rule where the sample could be no longer than that. We had to find the loop within that time. But it's like the Romplers of the era of the 90s, essentially the same thing. If you bought a Roland JV 1080, the same rules were applying there. You'd have just the attack of the note, and then right after that, as soon as it stabilized into almost a sine wave, you would loop that section. Usually only a single cycle, a single wave cycle.
I guess we're not talking about round robins and different kind of velocity layers.
Round robins, yes, that was a dream at that time, wasn't it?
Yeah, exactly. So was it just one note per note? You know what I mean?
Like on a guitar, what I used to do, and in those days, is just do it open string and then on the frets with the dots. So it would be the E string, and then the G would be the first dot, the third fret, and then the fifth fret would be A, and then I would go up to the next. Actually, I just go E, G, up to the A string, but you'd have, so essentially every 3 or 4 semitones, and you could get a good sound. We still sell acoustic guitar collection.
All right.
I think it's because there's 4 guitars in a a $45 package, but those are all sampled like that with only much less than the modern ones where you have every note obviously sampled and several 4 or 5 or 6 velocity layers and then round robins, right?
It's interesting. But I always looked at other communities that were limited. I remember when I was very young, I had friends who programmed on the Amiga, for example, or even the Commodore, and how limited it was. And you had to be quite clever in order to be able to do anything with that short amount of memory. So is there any benefits you think of? I mean, obviously it's better now. You have everything, right? You can do whatever you want. But is there anything to learn from? Are there any benefits of being limited this way? Do you think that has made you look at things differently, for example?
I think there are always advantages to limitations. Yeah, you learn how to choose the right notes, and then later on, for instance, most of the instruments that we've sampled, I'm actually playing them. I did not play the fiddle; someone else did that. But all the stringed instruments, like the guitars, mandolins, resonators, even the lap steel, I played, but I'm not a great guitar player, and I don't know how to play pedal steel, but I know what the sound is that I want, and I know what someone's going to expect, and I know what I want to happen in the instrument, in the end product. So when you hit a guitar, you take a pick or your finger and you pluck a guitar string, you can get a million different sounds. So you have to know, I guess that's the trick, is just knowing what it is you want to hear in the end. And another thing is that if you obviously you don't just set up microphones and run over and start playing. You have to get a sound first. So you test microphones, you go over, you play the instrument, and you play it back, and you'll play a few notes on a guitar, and then play them back on the speakers, and you go, okay, that sounds good. I've got something. That's a good sounding guitar. Let's run a test run. So I would go through and sample a few notes, pretty much like the old way where I would only do a few notes per octave, just to get an idea what the feel and what it would sound like, what the final product would be. Then cut them up, load them into Contact, and then play it. And you'd be amazed at how many times something sounds fine when you're playing back notes, just recording live notes and then playing it back on speakers. And when you have sampled it and you're playing it on a keyboard, it's a different expectation, I guess. not even sure how to describe it. It's just you have to test out the samples. You have to make sure that they're actually going to work when you play them, when your finger hits the key, and how they respond. And that's something that it takes a while to learn.
I'm sure, and the consistency as well, so it doesn't sound like 5 different instruments every time you hit a different key. That must be extremely...
that is, yes, that's huge. And I'm actually, I am going to give away some secrets because I'm actually going to, I'm planning to do a little YouTube series on a sampling an instrument, just a simple instrument, just to show how it's done, because people can use this on their own. You don't have to go and buy a sample library for a shaker. I mean, you could go out and and buy a percussion library for $200. I could go to the music store and buy a shaker for a few dollars, and then get a microphone and just make a few samples and do it yourself. But
those little egg shakers are magic. I mean, you take one of those and you just add that on top of what you've already done. I don't know, it's just like a little magical thing that happens. So that's really cool.
Yeah. No, but it's true. I don't have the patience to do it myself, but I think it's definitely good advice. I mean, we've had Ben Osterhaus on this pod before, and he also creates libraries himself for wanting to create things that doesn't exist out there. But yeah, it's interesting. I was just going to ask you actually if you had any tips on how anyone could start doing this, in a simple way. And it's really great that you're going to have a video course on it. But I was wondering if you had any tips on, should one actually get a hardware unit? Maybe it's easier to be simple, or should they use the computer, or what kind of mics or anything like that?
Yeah, the first library I did was using a Akai S2000. Which is a 12-bit sampler, I think. Maybe it might have been 16. That was 16. But I actually ran it through the Pro Tools interface and into it. But I wouldn't suggest doing it that way. It's much easier to just run a track. And if let's just say you're sampling a guitar, and the lowest string is the E string, and you just start playing that string on a single track, continuous, and then what I do is I just start soft and then start doing it louder, and then downstrokes and then upstrokes, and then you end up with a whole track of these things. And I will get into this when I do the video I'm planning. You cut them up, and you just if they're the same note and they're different velocities, you just stack them up in contact, and that's essentially all there is to it.
So it's contact you need to have. Is that what you're saying? That's the best.
You have to have some. Contact is an easy way to do it. You can do it without contact. You can use, what's that? I'm looking at my computer.
Does it have to be the paid version of contact then, right? I guess.
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
They've got Decent Sampler, which is a free platform. Piano Book actually uses a lot of those. And that's a great community to get involved in. So you've got Decent Sampler, you've got Sforzando, the SFZ format.
Yeah, I played around with that. That's fun.
That's a free platform.
You have to learn that little what is that format? SFZ.
SFZ.
Right, right. Where it's a text thing, which is cool because anyone can do it. You just have to have your samples, and you just have to write out this little text file. And that's a good way to get into it. Contact is easy because you just kind of drag things in, but it costs, you have to buy contact full, but which is expensive, and I understand that.
But how do you actually mic it? If you have an electric instrument, you plug it directly in then, I guess, and it's quite easy, but otherwise you need a good mic, no?
Yeah, you have to have, if you're do there are two different animals. If you're doing an electric guitar, you just plug the thing in, essentially, and record it, and it's much easier. An acoustic instrument, and I usually record them here in this studio. And although it's somewhat soundproofed, and I have actually this big foam thing, there's a window over here, and I block it off with a big foam block, and I have to record at night most often because there's too much noise, even when you have a lot of isolation. It's one thing if you're recording a vocal for a song in your home studio, but another thing if you're hitting a note and it lasts for 15 seconds and it's dying out, and a dog barks a street away, or your stomach growls. That's the worst one.
Yeah.
I
know about that one.
How much sound comes out of your body when you're trying to, until you try to sound something with close mics, because the mics are usually very close. If let's say this is the guitar, the hole for the guitar, my mics are usually around 6 to 8 inches above that. So they've got to be hot, and they've got to be, it's very sensitive. So
it's true. I just want to say I work as a voice talent and I have my booth, but it's when you realize everything sounds, damn it, like everything. Right. It's really difficult. So I know what you mean. To find silence.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. When I record an acoustic instrument, I have a little rig that I made where I set the instrument down and I have a thing to hold the neck, so I can just have the mics above for 2 reasons. Number one, if you sit there and try to hold a guitar and sample it, like I did for the first couple of projects, you get a little inconsistency in the pan and the positioning of the sound, because you're going to move around a little bit and not get back in the chair in the same place. The other thing is your body making too much noise. You're just holding the neck. You'll get all these little noises that will ruin a note just from the instrument creaking or imperceptible little movements in your fingers or hands. And if you try to hold a note down with your finger for 15 seconds and don't make any noise, try it with mics. So it's much more challenging to record an acoustic instrument.
So would you say in a way you become an instrumentalist, but in a different way? You don't master the guitar like a guitarist, but you master recording the guitar, you could say.
Right. And you watch, if you're going to do something, well, like the dobro or the resonator was a good example. I love that sound. I always loved that sound. And I decided, well, I'm going to do that. So I went and bought the instrument, and then I had to learn how to do the slides with a metal slide, and do it on pitch. Move it, hit the note and go up to pitch and down to pitch, which wasn't as hard as I thought it would be. But the next step is to, even before you do that, you watch hours and hours of videos of performances of that instrument, to see what it is that they do, so you have a clue as to what's expected for that instrument. You want to be able to watch a Jerry Douglas video, who's a great dobro player, and then at least get something close because that's what people are going to expect. They want to be able to have that sound in the sample library. So you watch, and then you try to learn from them and copy what they're doing to create the samples.
Oh, it seems like a lot of work to me. I mean, how many notes do you need for one note? You know what I'm saying? If you have the note G, you can't just record that one way, right? There has to be a lot of variations in different positions, no?
Yeah, what I do is we normally have 5 velocity layers. Okay, so just from going from soft to loud. Then I usually just have 2 round robins, honestly. I have a down pick and an up pick. Then slides, mutes, where you're muting the note with your palm. Harmonics, you usually have to have harmonics for that. And there's a lot of little articulations like slides. Some of the articulations I'll create later on with scripting, like a little trill where it's like a quick hammer on, you play it and you pull the finger off. Can do that, and then I'd also do hammer-ons with scripting. But you actually record the hammer-on. You record the sound of the hammer-on, then the script puts the first note, and then the second note adds that in the scripting. So yeah, there's a lot of notes. I don't know how many. It depends on the instrument. For instance, the lap steel was the first time I tried a real legato, where you actually had legato connected samples for every interval in the instrument.
Wow,
and that took a long time. There was a lot of moving around. But, you do an octave, then you have to do 11 steps, then you have to do 10 steps up, 10 steps all the way up to just a half step, and then Same thing sliding down.
Wow.
So, yeah, and I can only imagine. You reach a certain limit if you're on your own. If you're a one-man shop like or two-man shop like we are. Okay, actually, one man, one woman shop like we are. Where you can't, unless you hire a bunch of other people, you have to keep things at a know what your limitations are. In other words, I wouldn't try an orchestral library unless I had a lot of help.
Yeah, imagine the work. Yeah, when I start to understand a little bit more what this really means, I get more in awe of anyone creating any library. Actually, it seems too much work, but yeah.
I'll just say.
I think when we sit down at these libraries, and this is why these types of interviews I think are so important, because it allows us to pull the curtain back and to get that appreciation for what is inside this. It's hours and years of work and patience and long nights and just, trial and error and testing and all of this stuff. So when we hit that note or play that chord, there is so much more going on. And I think that is so important for us to just to see that, to hear about the process. And then when we go and try to do it ourselves, it's like, oh my gosh, what in the world? It gives us a greater appreciation for it. I think that's what's so wonderful about hearing about this, hearing about that process. It gives that appreciation that we need, and especially when we're talking about how much a library costs, the investment for contact, and all of that stuff. It all eventually comes together and makes sense in the end.
Right. It's a small industry, and there are so many talented people, and I have met many of I guess they're my competitors, but when you go to the NAMM show, which is a convention for music industry manufacturers in California, and then we'd all get together and have a dinner, and you get to talk to the other guys that do what you do, and and everybody just shoots their mouth off, gives all their secrets away, because who do you talk to about this?
Yeah.
My mom goes, what is it that you do again?
Yeah.
Well, Mom, I'm a musician. Let's just leave it with that.
Yeah.
Because it's but it's there. But these people are great. I have to say, you can ask them questions. They help each other out. So it's not, at least I haven't run across anything cutthroat at all in the industry. So I'm really blessed to be part of it and to have my little spot in the market. So.
And I think that's what's so great about Indiginus, is because you set what you wanted to be, you knew what you wanted to be, and you stayed true to that all of these years. And so that's what really I think has just allowed you to have the success that you have, because like what you said, you know your boundaries, you know what you want to do, you know the types of instruments that you want to sample, and so it allows you to have confidence in your space. You own your space pretty much, and so that's a lot of peace, I guess. So you're not trying to necessarily compete with all of these other guys. You're just doing what you do the way that you've decided to do it, and that's what stands out to me with Indiginus. And it's great, because I think that's what we have to do. We have to know who we are, set those limitations, and that eliminates a whole bunch of drama and stuff at the end of the day. So kudos for that.
Yeah, I want to riff on that too, because I mentioned this before. We chatted a little bit before, Tracy, that I've tried some of your libraries, and so I don't know how to say this, but just it's a feeling actually, and which is really what music should be all about. You would think that the sample library is just a bunch of notes, you hit a, and most libraries are like that. But I'm serious when I mean this. I'm not trying to be extra kind. Your guitar libraries, they really touch something in me. And it's interesting. You say you're not a guitar player, but and I'm not one either. But I was brought up with guitar. My father is a guitar player, a very good one, and so I I got a feel for a good guitar, and I sort of got nostalgic feels from your guitar libraries because those notes, there's something in them, which is weird. It's just a note, right? But I compare it to other, some of native guitars and other ones. They're okay, but they don't have that touch that your guitars have. And I was like, what? How did you do that?
Yeah, you nailed it, Sam. That's you
Mm.
you absolutely nailed it, because that was my experience too. And it's Tracy. Tracy's in these libraries. That's
Yeah.
what we've got, and that's I think that's what we feel and what makes it so special. Yeah, I'm glad you were able to experience that.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I mean, we keep the prices low because that was part of the reason. I think I've said it before that I couldn't afford the libraries that were out at the time I started Indigenus. One was Hans Zimmer's guitars. It was on CD-ROMs, and it was really good. But it was $300. It was out of my price range. So at the time, so that's part of the reason. We wanted to keep the prices lower and more accessible to people. And to me, the most important thing is that it's easy to play, that it inspires you. When you touch it, you want to play it, and that it's going to fool whoever, the listener, into thinking that it's the instrument. If it's a guitar, and if you play it in a guitar style, you should not be able to tell the difference. And it should be professional. So if you can use it on your friend's song, or you can use it on a primetime television show, and it should still compete with everybody else. It may not have some of the features of the more expensive libraries, but it should be able to fit in and should be able to sound just as professional as they are, and should be able to get the point across just as well.
Yeah, I just want to say, sorry for being so overly positive. You feel like I'm being paid here, but I'm not. But I like all of them, but I really was especially blown away by the mandolin and the ukulele. Oh, the other ones are good too, but because I haven't tried all the guitar sample libraries out there, but I haven't heard one that sounds so real, so good, like give that touch. I haven't. And I consider Virtu to be one of the better ones out there. They for guitar samples. But I don't think they match your ukulele and mandolin. I don't think so. Seriously.
I think what I do is thank you very much. We mic it close. I close mic everything because you can always add ambience, with a reverb or a impulse response or anything else, but you can't take it away. Once you have a room, the sound of this guitar bouncing off that wall back there, you can't get rid of that wall. So you're always going to hear that room. So the more, I think the closer, it makes sense, the closer the mics are to the source for an acoustic instrument, the more immediate it feels when you play it. It feels like it's faster, and it doesn't feel like you're dragging a suitcase behind you when you're playing.
Yeah.
And I think that's worked for us, is just doing and some people don't like it. Guitars are like violins, are like pianos. One person, loves it. Somebody did a review and just totally trashed
Oh, really?
a lot of my guitars. Broke my heart.
Oh.
And but he didn't like that sound. There's a certain sound that he likes in an acoustic guitar, and that guitar was not it. And other people will write and say that they have libraries that cost much more than what ours do, but they use ours. Ours is their go-to library, which makes me feel really proud.
That's a good point. I would say, even though I feel like your guitars can be used for many genres, that they are still quite genre specific. And if you think about what the instruments, what they are, and so would it be true to say that they are towards the country western style, even though they work with other styles?
Yes, and that's country Americana.
Americana, yeah.
Yeah, and that's because I was working on a fishing show. That's really the whole secret to it. And the name Indigenous, you asked before, it was just, I thought Indigenous, I was thinking Indigenous American. not like a Cherokee,
Yeah.
but just as folk, folk instruments. And the other thing was that the name, when I typed it in with the wrong spelling of Indiginus, there was the domain name was available, and that was the first one I ran across. And I thought, well, let's just go with that. This must be a sign.
All right. I just want to say, Christopher Seo is in the chat, and he is saying hi to Tracy. I don't know if you guys met before, but he's a nice composer. He was here on our last podcast. So, yeah.
Hey, Chris.
Do you have a question to Simeon, or did I interrupt anyone? I'm sorry.
No. I'm just thinking about what. Okay, so this probably doesn't have anything to do with sample libraries, but what inspires? I guess if you have a musical inspiration, Tracy, what would that be? What really inspires you as a musician? What has inspired you in the past musically?
My pastor is also a friend of mine that I used to play in his band, and his answer to that question I've always liked, and he would always say food.
To survive,
and,
you mean?
Yeah, and I wouldn't, and he's obviously just making a point.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good question. You know what? As I was talking about doing that fishing show, and the time crunch, which I did on purpose. I mean, I actually waited to the last moment because I enjoyed it. I like the excitement of having to come up with it. If someone gives me a commission, I need this piece, in December, 2 months from now. Thanks a lot, but I'm not going to even think about it for a couple months. It's just something about, when you have to do it, because you can go through so many different things. You can, second guess yourself. So the longer time you have. Good
point. So it's not procrastination. It's really just, I don't need that much time. This is silly.
That's half of it. And the other half is the closer you get to the deadline, the more pressure it puts on the producer to say, oh, yeah, that's good. We like that. That's good.
Good point. Yeah.
I don't think that's what you're asking me, though. I think you may be asking me something.
Do you have a musical memory? Do you have a point in your life where you heard a piece of music, or you were at a particular concert, or when did you know that you were going to be a musician, or just something that stands out in your memory about what inspired you as a musician?
Yes. There are two things that I can think of. One was a friend across the street, and we were kids. He brought over an album, and he goes, "Hey, I want you to listen to this. It's a little weird, but I think you'll like it." I put it on, and I hated it. And then I played it the second time. I go, "Well, there's something about it." And then by the third time, I was totally hooked on Emerson, Lake and Palmer. That was brain salad surgery, and and the guy was cool. I thought I was a keyboard player. Playing in our little band there, but then this guy was cool. He wasn't, he was a man's keyboard player. He was, he stabbed the organ. I mean, I just thought he was great. He broke the mold for keyboard players. And the other thing, and I think I share this with a lot of composers, was I was 19, sat down to watch this movie, and there are two suns setting, and Luke Skywalker's looking into the sunset, wondering what's happened to his droid, and that Jedi theme comes up underneath there, and I thought, I want to do that. This is what I want to do. I want to write music for picture, and that's true. I mean, that was a moment. That's probably, especially for the writing orchestral or media music, that was the moment where I decided I want to do that.
Yeah, I think that resonates with our generation. I think that was a moment that defined for all of us when we experience that moment where we recognize the power of music and film and imagination, and how it transports you, how the music transports you. Now, so a funny thing, if you can search this on YouTube, like, okay, so like the end scene in Star Wars Episode 4, the throne room scene, right? They have a version of it without John Williams' music, without any of it.
It's amazing.
And it is like, oh my goodness. The music is more of the actor than the actors. I mean, it's like the music is the star in those types of moments.
Oh, he saved that movie. He saved that movie.
Oh my, yeah,
it wouldn't be a disaster without it.
Incredible.
Yeah.
John Williams and James Earl Jones, absolutely. And I also saw a video where they had just Darth Vader scenes with David Prowse's voice.
Yeah.
And it was like,
oh my God.
Are we serious? So so Tracy, you absolutely resonate, because that's exactly.
On that
music is so powerful.
Yeah. On that same note, going back to the 20 seasons of a fishing show stays in your memory.
Yeah.
And you have two guys in a bass boat. And he casts his line out there and pulling it back, and you add music to it, and you can change, me and my friend Mark, that we were the other composer. You could make it anything. You could make it funny. You could make it really serious, like what's going to happen. And that's, let's face it, it's a reality series, and all reality series are like that, where you have this overblown music onto very weak material. And it's up to us. We're the ones, that have to carry it sometimes, I think, to the composers.
I believe, I totally agree. That's what I love. In a way, you have, I don't know if I want to use the word power, but it's more like putting, I don't know, so making everything extra, making, see the life the way I see it in a certain way. You can enhance the situation, putting gold on it, making it special. I like that sort of to really try to even take really boring stuff and try to make it interesting. I love that challenge.
It's the responsibility. Let's call it the responsibility.
Yeah, responsibility is a good word. I once had an exercise for my students, quite young students, but they had a very simple video clip, and they would try to enhance it by finding the right music for it to make it really interesting, and they actually worked really well. They weren't creating their own music in this case, which is the next step, but it's fun to try. Yeah.
Well, even music editing, for something like that is, that's a craft too.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Well, like American Graffiti. So the music for that movie, like picking the right music, picking the right songs, and editing that together. Yeah, it's a gift. It's a gift to be able to have that intuition.
I don't know. It's so silly to bring this up. I don't know if I said this before, but you might know of the dancer Merce Cunningham and the composer Cage, and they were a couple, and they wrote art together. But the funny thing is that one did the choreography and the other one did the music, but they never saw each other during the creation stage. They just had decided that, and I love that idea. And then they just put it together and see what happened at the end. They became quite famous.
Yeah, I remember this is going back to, I had the Mac Plus.
Yep.
And somebody hired us for a commercial. This guy called us and said, "It's for Procraft boats." Okay, Procraft boats. And it said it's a 30-second commercial, and it's going to be some, boats going along, and this is going to happen, and the logo is going to come up, and but they never gave us the footage. They never gave us the show. So we just kind of wrote kind of something that seemed like it might work, and couldn't just send them an MP3. No, I had to put the Mac Plus and the synth modules we were using, and drive to Orlando to the studio. And sat down, and the guy who's hiring us is sitting with his arms crossed like this. Mm-hmm. And so no one's heard the music yet except for me and Mark. So I had to hook up this, the sequencer live, because there was all we had at the time would be cassettes, and you can't do that. And then somehow I got time code from the guy from the video, and ran it, and it worked. It It was
Wow.
God. it was God. And we got paid, and it was great. But yeah, we didn't, it didn't know what it was going to be. They loved it.
I've actually got a J.L. Cooper SMPTE tape sync box upstairs that I use with a 4-track cassette recorder.
Yes.
And you heard the time code and that. Yeah, incredible stuff. Incredible.
Sounds like a modem, right? I actually just got rid of my Studio 3, Opcode Studio 3 that was sitting in here, and I threw it away the other day because there's no. These are Sam. These are I don't know if did you ever have to work with time code? You're younger than we are, I think.
No, I know about it.
It was
still in the business.
Yeah, you'd have a VHS, and you'd one channel, you take the right channel and put time code on that, and the other channel would be whatever sound there was on the program, and then you just have to keep running this thing back, and it would have to lock up. It was fun. These kids don't know how easy they had it.
It's true. Sometimes when you think about a DAW, how it works, we're so used to it. But Jesus Christ, man, what we can do with that? Well,
I had to sequence when it was 5 below 0, and that was going uphill one way and then down the other.
Yeah,
it's like, and I had to make sure it was in sync.
No, but I'm not that old, but I'm old enough to have seen people working with tapes in studios and a normal recording session, and everybody says it sounds better, and that might be true, but I'm not missing that. I can tell you.
No, I remember again my little MIDI studio. We started with an 8-track. I don't know what brand it was. It was a half-inch. I think it was half-inch tape, reel to reel, and we had these Dolby rack mount things that you had to run it through. So the sound would go in sounding pristine, and it would come back sounding not pristine. So anytime you when you mix something, even in the big studio, you'd play it in sounding one way. It came back, it did not sound as good as it did. It lost high end.
Yeah, that's true.
And I always thought, well, it's gotta be. So you'd always, they might boost the treble or the high end or 10K or something going into as you're recording, coming back to make it what you wanted it. And I remember the first time that we used an ADAT, which was an early digital 8-track format, and I was just amazed. What I played into it came back sounding exactly the way it is intended. So I was hooked on digital.
Wow. I'm guessing here, but isn't that the reason why a lot of 80s recordings and early 90s are very high frequency? There's a lot of emphasis on that because everybody's used to, pushing that in order to pull through the.
That could be. Or we all could have been deaf too, or just trying to get the frequencies back.
Yeah, but that worked. It took a while to come back into the scene after the digital.
There's nothing worse than taking your high pass filter and boosting it all the way up and moving it around and not being able to hear anything changing up in that. Yeah, that's So.
But that's funny. You quite quickly go into that sort of age where you start to lose your hearing. It doesn't take long actually, so you don't have to be too old. So it's interesting how these masters can still do that even though they're up there.
Yeah, just take care of what you have. Take care of it while you have it, and be gentle with your instrument. Yeah.
Speaking of instrument, I forgot to ask: do you play something, Tracy, or do you just sort of produce music or edit? Or...
I'm keyboards. I play keyboards.
Okay.
So that's pretty much what I've been. And I can play. I can strum chords. If I have a song somebody wants an acoustic guitar strum, I can play that. And I can throw down some power chords with an electric guitar, but that's it. I can't play lead, but I know again I can play 2 notes in a lead, just to get, just so I know how to get the sound I want. In other words, if it's
interesting.
Sliders.
I'm wondering if your situation is almost the best drive to really create good guitar instruments because you're a pianist, keyboardist like I am, and we really like that sound, but everybody knows how difficult it is to get guitar right, especially if you play it like a piano. It doesn't really work, right? And guitarists, they don't have to worry about that because they know how to play. So you really have that drive in order to get this right, how to touch it still sound like a guitar. And I actually think there's still quite a few libraries who nail that. So yeah.
We actually are, it's privileged that a lot of guitar players actually buy our libraries. either to play with a guitar MIDI interface, or more often they just going to play it on their keyboard. But they're a guitar player, and it's a compliment from a guitar player. Because you're in your house and it's 2:00 in the morning, the baby's asleep. You snuck out of the bedroom to get into your studio, and you don't want to wake anybody up, get yourself in trouble. Got to work in the morning. You don't want to pull out a guitar and tune it, and then try to get the technique. Your fingers, are out of shape, and the strings are hurting your fingers. You can just load up a virtual instrument and then play it. And
fabulous.
So even
Tracy, what is next for you? I know we have the fiddle. The fiddle's still kind of hot. But what do you see? What do you see the future of Indiginus? How do you see that shaping up in the next few years?
That's a good question. We have been for the last couple of years at just a threshold of what should we do? Should we just kind of stay where we are because it's kind of comfortable and put an instrument or an instrument and a half out per year, or try to expand and get other people involved? And I really haven't made up my mind on that yet. There's advantages, disadvantages to going either way. Part of it is you lose control, and I like control. Especially, if you hand something off to somebody else, are they going to miss something? Like I missed some things with the last release. But it's a good question. Even what instrument is next, I'm not sure. I kept thinking about a banjo. And then I actually pulled something out last time I talked to you, Simeon. I thought about this tutorial I was going to do. And actually, that's a sitar. But I pulled it out the other day. I think, well, what are we going to do with this thing? First of all, it's like it's foreign, and it's foreign in how it's played. Now, and I watched some videos in my normal style of trying to get my head around what it would be like, and I'm probably going to wait on that. Plus, one of the strings I think or the tuners is broken, so I'd have to get that fixed, which is not a big deal, but it'd take a pretty big investment to understand more about that music and see how far you want to go. So I'm probably going to put that.
It's a different world. It's a different world to wrap your head around. Yeah.
Right. And I want to do the tutorial. So that's not a good thing to do for a tutorial. So I'm probably going to do something simple, maybe but
the banjo fits the style you've been going for so far quite well, doesn't it?
It does. A banjo would work. I'm not, but I want to do the tutorial first, and I think that would be that one's going to be more involved. I'm trying to think of what the name of the instrument. So a little folk instrument. Oh, what's it called? Actually, I have one of those libraries already, but I'm going to do it again.
Actually, I don't think I have. You have a YouTube channel, right? I don't think I've posted that. I will do that after. I'll put it in the description. But maybe you could say it now if you have a YouTube channel so people can find these tutorials when they put them up.
Actually, the best way to go is to go probably Indiginus. I think you could probably put that search spelled in the weird way, Indiginus, or you go to our website and then you can.
You can find the YouTube channel on your website.
There's a link. There's a YouTube icon there up in the menu that you can check it out.
All right. Okay.
Actually,
can't see it right now, but it's probably outside of the screen. But
I'm looking at the dulcimer. That's what I was looking for.
Oh, yes. Dulcimer. Yeah, that's
because it's nice. It's a pretty little instrument.
Yeah.
And something that you could easily do a tutorial on sampling and maybe inspire some other people to get into sampling. One of the most successful people I ever met was a guy named Bruce Swadeen. Okay. One of the world's top mixing engineers. Okay. He just passed away last year.
Oh.
Yeah.
But he was big time Los Angeles. And for some reason he moved to Ocala, Florida, which is 10 miles from here. And when my friend Mark, again, he's going, hey, I was talking to this guy. You might know who he is. His name's Bruce Swadeen or something like that. And he was talking to him in the post office, and he says he has a studio. And he had built a whole studio in this small city. And sure enough, invited over there, went up to, and at the time he was working on a Jennifer Lopez album. He was mixing that. He was finishing that up. You walk in and to the hallway, and there's all this Michael Jackson. He was famous for Thriller and all of the Michael Jackson at his height. And then plus a lot of the early jazz recordings. He had a great idea called stereo, back when whatever the record company was working for in Chicago, they were recording jazz, and he goes, we should do stereo. And they go, I just don't, nobody cares about that. So he recorded them anyway. And now, years later, he could sell those recordings. But anyway, a genius, and you could ask him anything. You could just, and he mixed some of our Mark and I's things just because he liked us, and it was great. But my point is that if you have knowledge, why not pass it on? And he could ask him. You could ask him any microphone he ever used, anytime, and I wasn't paying him anything. It was just that way. He would just tell you exactly. And those kind of people are inspiring to me. You just why hold back? What are you saving it for?
Yeah, I totally agree. And I don't know if I'm the most giving person, but when I do, I really feel happy. It makes me happy. I think it's one of the reasons, when you give to others, it actually makes you feel better.
Right.
I mean, that's not the only reason, obviously, but it usually works.
Right.
Yeah.
But at least, you could tell people enough how to create something that fills a need for a project they have. One of the, I had a client that she wanted a Delta blues. She goes, I want the sound of Delta blues. I looked around for cheap libraries. I didn't, and my library didn't work. Acoustic guitar collection. So I bought a slide, and I threw some notes down real quick just to make her happy, so I could use it on a song. So it was just an inexpensive acoustic guitar with a slide, and it sounded great. And we actually, there it is, Delta Blues. Now that library, and that actually, now that you mentioned that, that is in my plans, is to actually come up with Delta Blues 2, which will be a deeper sampled, more deeply sampled, because essentially Delta Blues is that library I made for a client, and then I went back and filled in some of the spaces, to make it a commercial library. But it still needs, it could still be expanded and have, it could be a lot better than it is, and that's one thing I'm looking at.
That's cool.
Sounds really nice. Well, we are we have done about an hour now, and yes, I think that's a good time to end, unless you guys have anything to add. But otherwise, I just want to say thank you so much, Tracy, for coming on to our little show and letting us know about your really nice samples. And I really encourage everybody. I mean, I've tried these instruments, and I really encourage you to check out his instruments at indiginus.com. They are a little bit towards the country Americana, but they're still so good. You can use them for a lot of things. And if you are missing one of the string instruments like a guitar or not banjo, but mandolin and other things, I definitely encourage you to check that out. And it's very reasonably priced as well. Anything you want to add, Simeon?
No, I just agree, and it's so good to see you again, Tracy, and so excited to kind of hear more of your story and where things are going. I'm very, very blessed. So yeah, and I agree with Sam. If you need to, just download one of the guitar libraries, and I'm sure, and I'm sure that once you get your hands on those, just one, it's like the potato chips. You're not going to be able to just stop with one, because hopefully you will connect like Sam and I have connected with these instruments, and basically you're connecting with the heart that Tracy's put into all of these these things that he's done, the library. So it's just been great to be able to spend some more time with you.
Well, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on, guys. It's been great. I'd also like to just thank the people who have bought all these instruments over these past 18 years and enabled me to pay my electric bill and buy new instruments. And it's been great. And I look forward to carrying on and see what happens.
Yeah. All right.
Oh, wonderful. Well, that's it for this show. Don't forget to rate us if you can. If you're listening to this on the podcast, if you're watching on YouTube, we would very much appreciate it if you hit that like button. Perhaps subscribe so you will see when the next show is coming out. But normally we do shows every other week, Wednesdays, the same time as today. So thank you very much and hope to see you back soon.